Well, if your 401k could talk today, it would likely express some relief as the markets appear to make a little bit of a comeback following 5 days of historic and very expensive losses. So the drop caused by President Donald Trump turning up the heat on tariffs. So we're talking about Chinese imports right now. They face major tariffs as both President Trump and President Xi of China told the nations that they would hold the line on trade. In fact, look at this. The president's post on social media captures the moment, saying essentially if China does not rescind their retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. goods by tonight, Mr. Trump will impose an additional tariff of 50%. So officials in China calling this bullying. They vow they'll fight to the end. Meanwhile, the White House says dozens of countries reached out to Trump to negotiate a possible deal on tariffs. For example, both Vietnam and Zimbabwe offered to entirely eliminate their tariffs on the U.S. Also, by the way, the European Union made an offer to end tariffs on cars and industrial goods if the U.S. returned the favor. Lots to talk about here. CBS News senior White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs joining us live on the stream. So is this news signaling kind of an off-ramp that perhaps the stock markets could be rebounding and that this is all tied together, the result?
Well, I do know that negotiations are happening, so that has been unclear on whether there was any wiggle room in these new tariffs. Yes, it sounds like there is, although the Treasury Secretary has said it's possible that the tariffs wouldn't come off in full, that perhaps there would be some partial removals. That's not quite clear yet. What we know so far is there aren't any exemptions, but the White House has been trying to figure out which phone calls to line up for the president as these nations are calling in and asking to meet with the president in person. The White House is trying to figure out which allies and which nations to set up these meetings with first and which ones to put lower down the priority list. And the White House is collecting lists of concessions from these countries. Perhaps it's more military aid funding. The U.S. provides a lot of military protection to certain countries, and the president is suggesting that these nations should be helping pay for that. It's also energy deals. The president, in a post this morning, talked about wanting countries to be spending more on U.S. energy. So the list goes on. So as negotiations continue, the White House is is sharing that with us, trying to make it clear that nations are willing to come forward with their ideas for essentially kowtowing to the U.S. in order to get these restrictions either lifted or maybe just lowered.
Fascinating. Tariffs as leverage and a masterclass in whether that will work. You also have some reporting on U.S. talks with Iran. The president has been talking about this extensively. What are you hearing?
Right. What we know is that the president's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, will be going over there to the Middle East. He will be meeting with the Omanis in Oman, and I'm not sure yet whether they will be direct talks or indirect talks. It sounds like the U.S. is pushing, is unrelenting in saying that these should be direct talks. If that's the case, if Steve Witkoff does get direct talks with the foreign minister, it would be the first time since the Obama administration. Pretty high stakes here, but this would just be the opening salvo, I'm told. It would be kind of laying out what the White House is interested in and hearing about, saying, look, we can either do this by diplomacy, and as they well know, the president has threatened direct military intervention if necessary. Sanctions could be reimposed. So what I'm told is it's going to be, hey, which form of negotiation would you like here? What are you willing to do? Let's make this happen. Big deal, especially since the Israeli prime minister was just here yesterday, and this is an issue of great importance to Israel.
Right, and that really begs the question I've had, because we did see the Israeli prime minister there not far away from you yesterday. What's the connectivity, if any, between that visit, between the news of last week relative to hitting Houthi rebels by the United States? Is there any connective tissue that leads us to this Iran meeting?
Yeah, I do think so. I think Steve Witkoff has been traveling around the Middle East, as well as his aide, Morgan Ortagus, gathering information, figuring out what's possible, and they've been coordinating very closely with the Israelis. I know that for sure. So that's what I can tell you, is just a lot of coordination between the two, trying to figure out how to best move forward. And President Trump made it clear yesterday that what Israel wants is what the U.S. wants.
Wearing a pair of very smart glasses, making us all smarter. Jennifer, it's nice to have you with us on CBS News 24/7. I got to talk to you offline where you got those. They're pretty cool.